Stepping on the rock, I got the plan in hand. Blueprint laid out like a city grandstand. East Coast vibes where the rhymes expand. Building up my dreams like the streets of my land. From the towers of the road down to architects. And 3D visions watch the city connect. Communicating watch through my microphone. Engineer repeat, hear the city's tone. Centralized style to watch the city grow. Blueprints and rhymes in the bread and flow. Bricks turn the bars every line I throw. East Coast hard, making dreams slow. Matter of the avenues with precision in mind.
Hello yet again and welcome back to Civil Visualizing with Sam. This is episode 5, and in this episode we are going to take this site design with a stadium and we are going to take it from Sketchup as the base model into Civil Engine for final visualization. I do want to give a huge shout out to my friends over at Lage Design. They used to do some amazing landscape and architecture design. I will link to them in the video description below. And with that, let's start by exporting this first model as an OBJ so we can bring it into Civil Engine. And there are 3 different models. There's this surface on-site, there's a surface off-site, which is the surrounding area, and then there's the actual stadium itself. And this is actually going to be pretty common where you have multiple pieces you have to assemble together in Civil Engine, or maybe you have the site from the civil engineers and the buildings from the architects, and you have to bring them together. So we're going to do that. If you exported them all from the same model in SketchUp, they should come in together in Civil Engine. But in this scenario, there are 3 different SketchUp models, so we may have to do some assembling in Civil Engine, which isn't the end of the world. All right, also because my 2-screen setup, the drop down in the file menu in SketchUp isn't showing for you, but I'm going down to export 3D model, and we're going to call this, we can just leave it as it is, and then for our export options, we want to call this, we want to include all these settings right here. Centimeters is fine, export texture maps, yes. So let's go to export. Okay, so you can see there, it took a minute to export it. But now it's done. This pop-up that shows up here saying 83,000 faces, which is just fine. So now we're going to find the offsite and the actual building itself. All right, so now we have the offsite model here in SketchUp. You can see sometimes you're going to end up with some rogue pieces up in the sky. We can just go ahead and select those and delete them. And then also it's going to make it easier if we move this close to the origin point. At some point, we do plan to get some georeferencing for imported objects in Civil Engine, but we don't have that yet. And so for now, the best results are going to come if you bring it to the origin point. And also to view something like this, just as a hint, in SketchUp, you can turn edges off, and that's going to give you a lot better idea of what's going on for a project like this. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing as before. File, export, 3D model, and we're going to call this offsite, and same options as before. Again, unit centimeter, we just need to make sure that we import with centimeters when we bring it into Civil Engine, and I want to go to export. All right, so now I have Civil Engine open. As a note, this is early 2025 and we are weeks away from releasing the beta version. So this is kind of like a pre-beta version of Civil Engine. When you're using it, it may look somewhat different than what you're seeing here today, but it should work well. So now we're going to go to import base model, and we're going to find those pieces as OBJs. So switch to OBJs, and let's start with the on-site. Remember that we want that to be centimeters. Everything else will probably be fine as is, and then let's do finish import. One other note while I'm waiting for this to import, which did not take very long, is that this is the type of project that might also work well with some of the architectural 3D visualization tools. Civil Engine is primarily built for transportation and other civil projects. This is kind of a blend of architecture and civil, but I do want to show kind of how with Civil Engine you can get some efficiencies even for an architectural heavy project like this one. All right, so we have this one imported. It seemed to be fine. One quick way to check scale is double right click and then press F1. And now you're walking around and you can tell this scale looks just about right, which is a pretty fun way to check that out. All right, so now we want to import the other base models. So let's go to import new. Again, switch to OBJ and find the offsite, finish import. All right, so you can see these two came in at different heights. Looks like the rotation's probably the same, but we can get those tied in together. If I was better in SketchUp, I probably could have imported them all into the same SketchUp model and then exported them separately from there. That would have brought them in together, but I'm going to show you how you can bring in these pieces together right here in Civil Engine. So over here, we can just use this slider to move that up and down. You can see we're going to go down quite a bit, so let's just try 1000 and let's try 1800. All right, so we're pretty close. And then we can do the X and Y's as well. All right, so you can see we're pretty close, and now with just a little bit more tweaking, I'll get those to line up perfectly. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Now we need to bring in the stadium model. All right, so this one took a little longer. It's a much bigger model, so we can bring that down just like we did the other ones. All right, so I've got everything in here. This looks pretty cool, and as I mentioned, this is somewhat architectural, but there are a lot of civil elements to this project, so it will work perfectly for our demonstration. One note is when you import, you're going to see this box is already checked by default, but if Civil Engine detects that there is a glass surface, it will automatically apply the glass from our materials library. You can see here that it's done that. We can go change all that later, but that's just kind of an efficiency that's built into the software. All right, so now we have all three pieces, and now it's just a matter of texturing them. And honestly, this might be the most time-intensive part of this entire project. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now.
To the bridges, I'm on a quest, curating visions where urban dreams manifest. Render every angle, each perspective clear. In this living city-state, that should persevere. Like slick and high-rise frames, create symphonies. In this canvas and ceiling stone, my voice brings dreamscapes, the light with visions that inspire every block, every beat, fueling the urban fire. Concrete rhythm, solid as the ground we roam, showing every blueprint into my lyrical home. Charted in future with every rhyme pronounced. Drawn blue lines turn to dreams, drafting in dimensions with 3 and TV beams. Sidewalks got stories every corner of verse. In this urban poetry, the city submerges from world beats to sky high.
All right, so I textured all three base models. That took about an hour. Currently, our texturing system is a little cumbersome. We will improve it in the future, but you have to go to the hierarchy. You have to drop down each of those, and then you can go over here on the left once you select them, and you can choose which texture you want from our texture library. One thing I want to point out is I'm relying heavily on stylized materials here. Personally, I like the aesthetic. As part of these videos, I like to kind of show things that I've learned over the years. You're welcome to use these or not. Some of these projects you may have aerials that go on for miles, or mountains or buildings in the distance, but it works, in my opinion, just to have white in the background, and it's gonna kind of put the focus on the project, and I think that that's sometimes a good thing. And then the project only went out so far, so what I did beyond that was I went to Assets, Dynamic, and we have these building blocks, and I created a slab, put it in here, changed the material to one of the stylized materials, and then I scale it down really big, so you can see that goes so that our white aesthetic extends off into the distance. Personally, I think this is turning out really nice. We're utilizing some of the reflections of our material library, and when you do go to the library, you want to go look. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see all these stylized materials, and feel free to play around with those because they just make it really easy to do cool stuff like this. All right, so the goal is to make the on-site stuff realistic, the off-site stuff stylized. You can see here, for example, that I didn't turn these red ones to the stylized, so let's go ahead and do that. So let's go to off-site. Then we just got to go through and find out which one we missed by going through these. Again, in the future, we'll have kind of a picker tool or a paintbrush tool where you'll be able to do all this stuff in real time more efficiently, but for now you just gotta go through. So I found it, click on the paintbrush button and just go to one of those stylized, and then it's going to retain that color, and so we have to go through and reset that color. That's a bug that may be fixed by the time that you're working on this. All right, so what this is in need of the most is some landscaping. So we're going to do that by going to our assets, library assets. Let's collapse our buildings and go to trees. And I'm just going to use these beech trees. They're going to play a pretty good role whenever you're trying to do something generic. So we'll start out with trees, and then we will move to some more types of landscaping after we do that. So to place trees, you just want to go select the tree that you want. Select the one. Let's just use this one. And then you can place those one by one. We will have a paintbrush tool in the future, but we don't have that yet. You can also place them using the path placement tool, but for now we're just going to use them here. I'm not a landscape architect, clearly, but hopefully this will give a good idea of how you can quickly add trees. And trees is just a cheat code. Wherever you can use them, either in the existing or proposed design, it's going to add a lot to your project. So I'm going to go ahead and place those. And
We stack convictions in concrete flowers. Players lay down like tracks sturdy and fast. In this symphony and still the city's jazz. Visualize this how I the city grow. Blueprints around, see the rhythm flow. Which turn them all to.
all right, so we placed the trees. That went pretty quickly. And now those show up in the assets. And we want to organize these. So I'm going to select the top, hold down Shift, select the bottom. That selects them all, and then right-click Wrap with Folder. One of the reasons for this is organization. The other reason is because we want to hide these selector icons when we're not using them. So I renamed the folder Trees, and then I'm going to lock it, and that's going to hide those selector icons. So now you can tell aesthetically just how much better this is looking. If you want to place trees in the distance, we do have low poly trees like this, and you could use those to populate the stylized area. In the future, we'll probably have some white versions of these as well, but that's an option if you want to go for that stylized look throughout. So one thing I want to do is just jump in. I showed at the beginning how you can just double right click and then press F1, and you're going to jump into the model. And this is just a really cool representation. You can see this model we were given by, again, our friends over at Lage Design has some cool interior stuff. So we can see that through the window. We can see our trees. We can see our stylized white plane in the distance. We could walk around this entire building if we wanted to. We're not going to do that, but this is WSD, and this does work with an Xbox controller if you so desire. So that option is there, and we'll formalize these at the end. We do have the publisher down here at the bottom, and that's really cool. A really cool way to see what's going on. All right, so we need to continue populating our scene. You can see here we have some seating areas, and we're going to put some people in there. So we can go to our assets panel, go to dynamic, pedestrians, static pedestrian. And now we can put people here. And from here, you can control, so these are templates. These are like instances. And we want sitting talking. And then let's get this individual rotated over here, moved onto the seat. And then if you don't like this certain person, then you're a jerk. Just kidding. So you can choose whichever one that you want. So if I place this one again, then it would be that same person and that same animation. We don't want to do that, so we need to create another template or another instance of this pedestrian. So let's go pedestrian. So if we wanted to do a lot, we could just sit here and do a bunch of them all at once and then place them more like a batch scenario. And to edit them, you can click this button. Sometimes this is finicky. The same thing happens when you do this up here. So let's do cross-legged talking.
Stepping on the block, I got the plan in hand. Blueprint laid out like a city grandstand. East Coast vibes where the rhymes expand. Building up my dreams like the streets my land.
And then one other thing I just want to test, I don't know if this is going to work, but it might be kind of cool, and that's to put some lights in here. One thing to remember with lights is they're not very performant, and so you may run into a scenario where if you put too many lights, it's just going to really slow things down. So just be really careful with that.
When the street lights blind, through underground tunnels with skyscraper peaks, crowding the future in these lines.
So you can see there that actually looks pretty cool, especially if we get some close-up shots of these people. We probably should put at least a few down here below. And actually, you know what we can do is just put a pedestrian path. And if this works, we can have them kind of walk out the door and then back into the building.
From the boroughs to the bridges, I'm on a
Let's lower our volume. It's going to look a little distracting if there are a ton of those people, but maybe one every once in a while, and then let's just do another one in the other direction.
V8 symphonies and this canvas and ceiling stone, my voice brings cheesecake, the light with visions that inspire every block, every beat.
Alright, so that's looking pretty nice. Now we want to do some parked cars. And the best ways to place parked cars is by going to our path presets, and then down here we have parked cars. And so you can just place them like this. Cars stacked end to end, so we don't need them to be that dense. So what we can do is go to our spacing and adjust that until it's a multiple of the parking spaces. Alright, so it looks like about 27.5, it's gonna be good. And then we want to rotate these, so let's just do 90. There we go. Now we can do that in the other parking stalls as well. Again, our spacing 27.5 should be fine. You can manually place cars as well, but we don't need to do that for all of these. What we're trying to do is just get some sort of realistic traffic parking cars. I didn't want to do that, but I do want to do my spacing to 27.5. And you can also do longitudinal offset if they're not the way you want them to. But yeah, we're just trying to make it believable. That's the goal with a lot of this stuff. And looking at this asphalt texture, I don't know if I love it. It's just really distracting when the sun is shining on it from this direction, so that's something that I might change. Just planning out loud.
Stepping on the block, I got the plan in hand. Blueprint laid out like a city grandstand. East Coast vibes where the rhymes expand.
And this parking technique even works around curved parking stalls like this. The spacing may be off, but the paths can be placed like this. And you know what? Those kind of fit all together with that spacing, so we're just going to leave them there.
Blueprints and rhymes in the bread and flow. Bricks turn to bars every line I throw. East Coast hard, make your dreams slow. Mad on the avenues with precision and...
Alright, so now we have these parked car paths. We're going to hold down shift to select them all, wrap them with folder. Let's rename them parked cars. And let's lock it. We can rename this one pedestrians. Alright, so I had to kind of rush to the end of this because we are preparing for our beta launch next week. But I did want to just kind of show how these final renders turned out and just show how this only took a few hours, but we went from those base model pieces in SketchUp to these final renders in 3 hours or less, which is really amazing when you think about it. Again, huge shout out to Lage Design for allowing us to use their work on this. Please check them out for your landscaping needs. They're really good people. And make sure to find out more about Civil Engine by going to beyondcat.com/Civil Engine. And I will talk to you in the next one.
Drawn blue lines turn to dreams, drafting in dimensions with 3 and TV beams. Sidewalks got stories every corner of verse. In this urban poetry, the city submerges. From world beats to sky high towers. We stack convictions in concrete flowers. Plans laid down like tracks sturdy and fast. In this symphony and still the city's cast. Visualize this how I the city grow. Blueprints.